I had barely wiped the grease from my hands, the smell of motor oil still clinging to my skin from tinkering with the car in the garage, when Clara's voice sliced through the quiet like a blade. She stood in the doorway to the living room, her silhouette sharp against the dim light, and said, "You've got 3 minutes to hear this, Marcus, because I'm about to leave to meet the man who actually makes me happy." No greeting, no hesitation, just her eyes, cold and unyielding, pinning me in place as if daring me to crumble. For a moment, I froze, my mind scrambling to catch up. My hands hung limp at my sides, the rag I'd been holding forgotten. Clara stood there, her sequined dress catching the light, every inch of her polished and prepared. She wasn't rushing. She was savoring this. "You should be happy for me," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "I found real joy. Our marriage? It's been boring for ages." Each word landed like a stone, heavy and deliberate, meant to bruise. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as some cruel joke, but her gaze didn't waver. My chest tightened, air suddenly hard to come by. I forced myself to speak, my voice low, mechanical. "You're telling me you're going on a date with another man, and I'm supposed to just what? Clap for you?" She tilted her head, a smirk curling her lips. "Exactly. Don't make it weird, Marcus." Inside, I was unraveling. The life we'd built flickered through my mind like a fading reel. Mornings when I'd brew her coffee just the way she liked. Nights when I'd hold her even as I felt her slipping away, her silences growing colder. Had I missed something? Had I failed her so completely that she could stand here, rewriting our vows as if they were nothing? The betrayal wasn't just her words. It was the ease with which she spoke them, the way she seemed to relish my shock. She was denying my entire existence in her world, and it burned deeper than I could name. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to shake that smug look off her face. But something held me back, a faint, stubborn voice in my head whispering that I couldn't let her see me break. Not tonight. Not like this. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms, and stayed silent, watching as she adjusted her dress one last time, her movements deliberate, almost performative. Then, as she turned to leave, something slipped from her purse and fluttered to the floor. A reservation ticket for a high-end restaurant across town. She paused, glancing at it, then at me, a half-smile flickering across her face. She didn't pick it up. It wasn't an accident. That ticket was a challenge, a taunt, an invitation to witness her so-called happiness. The door clicked shut behind her, and I stood there rooted, the ticket glowing like a coal at my feet. My world had just cracked open, and I was still catching my breath. But as the silence settled, I felt something shift, a spark of resolve amid the wreckage. Clara thought she'd won. She had no idea what was coming. Before we dive deeper into this story and see how I face this betrayal, let me know where you're listening from. Share your thoughts on Clara's move in the comments. If this hooks you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The silence Clara left behind was deafening, a void that swallowed the room whole. I stood there, the restaurant ticket still burning a hole in my vision, her mocking smile etched into my mind. My hands trembled, not just from shock, but from a rising tide of anger I could no longer ignore. I couldn't just wait here, drowning in questions. I needed answers, something to anchor me in this chaos. So I moved, almost on instinct, to the desk in the corner where our shared laptops sat. Clara had always been careless with her backups, syncing her phone to our cloud account without a second thought. I logged in, my heart pounding as the screen loaded. The folder labeled Messages appeared, and I clicked, barely breathing. Line after line of texts unfolded, none of them mine. They were hers, sent to a number I didn't recognize. My eyes scanned the words, each one a fresh wound. He doesn't suspect a thing, so clueless. I can't wait for tonight. It's going to be the best yet. The intimacy in her words, the casual cruelty of her mockery, hit me like a fist. She'd planned dates, shared secrets, laughed at my expense, all while I'd been pouring myself into our life, blind to her betrayal. My stomach churned, but I kept reading, forcing myself to face every syllable of her lies. Then my phone buzzed, snapping me out of the haze. Clara's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, my pulse racing. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her stew in her arrogance, but another part needed to hear her voice, to see if she'd falter. I answered, keeping my tone flat, controlled. Her voice came through, syrupy and false. She said she was just checking on me, worried I might be upset. The act was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. I cut her off, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I told her to come home now. We needed to talk. There was a pause, a hitch in her breath, then a sharp laugh like she thought I was begging. She agreed, saying she'd be back to wrap this up. When Clara walked through the door, her confidence was still there, but it was fraying at the edges. She tossed her purse onto the couch, her eyes scanning me for weakness. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Without a word, I held up my phone, the screen glowing with her messages. Her face changed in an instant, color draining, eyes narrowing as she registered the evidence. For a split second, I saw panic, raw and unguarded, but she recovered fast, crossing her arms. She called it nothing, just text, said I was blowing it out of proportion. Her dismissal only fueled the cold clarity settling over me. Then she slipped, her voice rising in defense. She admitted she'd been planning to leave for 8 months, longer than I'd ever imagined. 8 months of lies, of her coming home to me with a smile while plotting her escape. Worse, she let it spill that she'd been eyeing our shared assets, intending to take what she could without a word. This wasn't just betrayal of the heart. It was calculated, greedy, a theft of everything we'd built. My hands tightened around the phone, but I stayed calm, letting her words hang in the air. Inside, I was breaking, but not the way she wanted. Each lie she'd told, each secret she'd kept, stripped away the illusion of the woman I'd loved. I saw her now, not as my wife, but as a stranger who'd played me for a fool. Yet in that pain, something else emerged, a resolve to not let her define me. She thought she held all the cards, but I was about to change the game. Clara's words still echoed in my ears, her admission of an 8-month plan cutting deeper than any knife. Her casual dismissal of our life, her scheming for our shared assets, left a bitter taste that lingered as she stood there, defiant, expecting me to crumble. But something inside me shifted, a cold resolve hardening in place of the pain. I wasn't going to beg, wasn't going to give her the fight she clearly craved. Instead, I walked to the front door, my steps deliberate, and swung it open wide. My voice came out steady, emotionless. I told her to go, to chase her new joy, to leave. The words felt like stones dropping into a still pond, rippling out with a weight I hadn't anticipated. Clara froze, her smirk faltering. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes searching mine for a crack in my resolve. She hadn't expected this. She'd scripted a scene where I'd yell or plead, giving her the power to walk away victorious. But this, my calm surrender, threw her off balance. Her confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of unease. She adjusted her purse, her movements jerky, and for a moment, I thought she might argue. But she didn't. She walked out, her heels clicking against the floor, each step sounding less certain than the last. The door closed behind her, and the house fell silent. Alone, I stood in the dim light of the living room, the emptiness pressing in. I expected grief to swallow me, to drag me under with memories of what we'd had. But instead, a strange clarity settled over me, sharp and unshakable. Clara's betrayal wasn't my end. It was my chance to start over. I didn't want revenge, not the kind that destroyed. I wanted to rebuild, to prove to myself that I was more than the man she'd discarded. My mind raced, already turning toward what came next, toward freedom. I moved to the study, pulling open a drawer where I kept personal papers. Tucked away was a bank statement for a savings account I'd set up years ago, a small fund for dreams I'd shelved to keep our life stable. Clara never knew about it. Her prying eyes had never found this one secret. I logged into the account online, the balance glowing on the screen. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to walk away without touching the life we'd shared, enough to start fresh on my terms. This wasn't luck. It was a choice I'd made long ago, a piece of myself I protected. Then Clara's footsteps returned, abrupt and hurried. She pushed through the door, her face tight with purpose, and made a beeline for the jewelry box on the mantel. She reached for the diamond necklace I'd given her on our 5th anniversary, her fingers closing around it. She muttered something about forgetting it. I stepped forward, my hand catching her wrist gently but firmly. I told her it stayed here, that she could come back for it when she deserved it. Her eyes flashed with fury, but she saw something in my gaze, something unyielding. She let go, backing away, her defiance crumbling into frustration. She stormed out again, this time without looking back. In that moment, I felt the chain snap. Letting her go wasn't weakness, it was power. I'd been tethered to her for too long, but now I was free to choose my own path. Fear lingered, a shadow of what lay ahead, but so did hope, fragile but growing. I was ready to find out who I could become. The house felt like a tomb after Clara's second exit, its silence heavier than ever. I stood by the mantel, the diamond necklace still in its box, its gleam a reminder of a life that no longer existed. My decision to let her go had freed something in me, but it also left a restless energy I couldn't shake. Staying here, surrounded by the ghosts of our past, was unbearable. I needed to see the truth for myself, to confront the reality of her betrayal head-on. My hand found the car keys, and before I could second-guess it, I was out the door, the restaurant ticket from her earlier taunt tucked in my pocket. I drove to the upscale restaurant across town, its name printed in elegant script on the paper. I parked in a shadowed corner of the lot, far enough to stay unseen, but close enough to watch. Through the wide glass windows, I spotted her. Clara sat at a candlelit table, her laughter bright and unguarded, her body leaning toward a man in a tailored suit. His slick hair and easy confidence screamed money, the kind of flash she'd always been drawn to. They clinked glasses, her eyes sparkling with a joy I hadn't seen in years. She looked like she belonged there, like I'd never been part of her world at all. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, as the sight carved a hollow space in my chest. I wanted to storm in to shatter their perfect moment, but I stayed rooted. Acting on rage would only give her what she wanted, proof that I was broken. Instead, I let the pain wash over me, let it sharpen my resolve. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over Derek's number. He was my oldest friend, the one who'd always had my back, no questions asked. I called, my voice rough as I spoke. I told him I needed a place to crash tonight. He didn't hesitate, just told me to come over, his tone steady and sure. As I started the engine, my phone lit up again. A text from Clara. She wrote that she hoped I was okay, that I shouldn't do anything rash to worry her. The words dripped with fake concern, a last attempt to keep me under her thumb. I stared at the screen, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. She wasn't worried about me. She was scared I'd disrupt her game. I powered off the phone, letting her message sink into the void. She didn't get to control me anymore. Driving away, I glanced back at the restaurant one last time. Clara and her date were stepping outside, her arm looped through his. She laughed, her head tilting back, but then her gaze swept across the lot, pausing where my car had been moments before. She squinted into the darkness, her posture stiffening for a heartbeat, as if she sensed me. My breath caught, pulse spiking. Had she seen me? But she shook her head, dismissing it, and slid into a sleek car. That fleeting moment, whether real or imagined, sealed it for me. Our paths had diverged, and there was no going back. The pain of seeing her so carefree clawed at me, but it also burned away the last traces of doubt. The Clara I'd loved was gone, replaced by someone who'd chosen to erase me. Sitting in that car, I felt the weight of loss, but also the first stirrings of strength. Calling Derek wasn't just about finding a place to sleep. It was about choosing to move forward, to lean on someone who'd never let me down. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Derek's apartment was a cluttered sanctuary, the kind of place that smelled faintly of takeout and old leather, but it felt like a lifeline after the night I'd had. I sank onto his worn couch, the springs creaking under me, and took the cold beer he handed over without a word. He sat across from me, his eyes steady, waiting. He didn't push, just gave a simple nod and said to talk when I was ready. That quiet understanding broke something open in me, a dam I'd been holding back since Clara's betrayal came to light. I started talking, my voice low and raw, spilling everything. I told him about her announcement, bold and cruel, about the ticket she'd dropped like a gauntlet. I recounted the messages I'd found, each one a betrayal sharper than the last, and her admission of an 8-month plan to leave me behind. I described the restaurant, her laughter with that stranger, the way she'd looked at him like he was her future. My words came out steady, but inside, I was reliving every cut, every moment that had stripped me bare. Derek listened, his face tightening with anger, his jaw set as I laid out the depth of her deception. He leaned forward when I finished, his hand resting on his knee. He asked what I was going to do now, his voice carrying a mix of concern and challenge. The question hit me like a spark, igniting something fierce. I met his gaze, my resolve hardening. I said I wouldn't let Clara win. I wouldn't sit in that house, nursing my wounds while she danced through her new life. I'd make her regret underestimating me, not with petty revenge, but by taking back my own power. Derek's eyes lit up, a grin breaking through. He slapped his thigh, saying that was the spirit, that I should go big or not bother at all. My mind raced, a plan taking shape. I told him I'd sell the house, that it was too full of shadows to keep. I'd use the money, along with my private savings, to leave this place behind, to start over somewhere new. The words felt right, like a vow to myself. Derek nodded, his approval solidifying my decision. He raised his beer, a silent toast to my fight, and I felt a flicker of strength I hadn't known was still there. Then Derek hesitated, his expression shifting. He admitted he'd heard whispers months ago, rumors about Clara getting too close to someone at her law firm. He hadn't told me, unsure if it was true, not wanting to hurt me without proof. The confession stung, but it also clarified things. Her betrayal wasn't as hidden as I'd thought. Others had seen signs, and their silence had let it fester. It wasn't Derek's fault, but the truth fueled my urgency. I couldn't wait for her to make the next move. As we sat there, the weight of the night didn't vanish, but it shifted. I wasn't alone on that couch, surrounded by empty takeout boxes and Derek's mismatched furniture. I was reclaiming pieces of myself Clara had tried to steal. She'd spent years chipping away at my confidence, making me feel small, unworthy. Now, I saw it clearly. She projected her own flaws onto me, and I'd believed her for too long. Selling the house wasn't just about money. It was about breaking free, about proving I didn't need her to define my worth. The pain still throbbed, but it was no longer my master. I had a plan, a friend, and a fire inside me that refused to go out. For the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I left Derek's apartment late, the city lights blurring as I drove back to the house that no longer felt like home. My plan burned in my chest, a quiet fire fueling each step. I didn't turn on the lights when I got inside, choosing instead to sit in the armchair by the window, shrouded in darkness. The stillness was heavy, but I embraced it, letting it steady me for what was coming. Clara would return, and when she did, I'd be ready. Hours passed, my thoughts sharp and focused, until the sound of keys rattled at the door. Clara stepped in, her silhouette unsteady, the faint scent of wine trailing her. She froze when she saw me, her eyes wide in the dim glow filtering through the blinds. Her voice wavered as she spoke, asking why I was still up. I leaned forward, my hands resting on my knees, and asked how her evening went, my tone calm, almost soft. She fidgeted, clutching her purse, and mumbled about it being just a night with friends. The lie was flimsy, and I let it hang for a moment before responding. I told her I'd seen everything at the restaurant, watched her with her new joy. My words landed like stones, and the air thickened. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She turned, fleeing upstairs without another word, leaving the tension to simmer until morning. I barely slept, my mind too alive with what lay ahead. At dawn, I rose, moving with purpose to the kitchen. I brewed coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me as sunlight crept through the curtains. Clara appeared later, her eyes puffy, her usual polish replaced by unease. She stood in the doorway, hesitant as I sipped my coffee. I set the mug down, my gaze steady, and told her I had news. I'd spoken to a lawyer and a realtor. The house was being sold. She had 10 days to pack her things and leave. The words came out clear, final, each one a brick in a wall I was building between us. Clara's face twisted, shock giving way to fury. She shouted that I couldn't do this, that the house was hers too, that I had no right. Her voice rose, desperate, as she threw out accusations, claiming I was overreacting, that I owed her a chance to explain. I cut her off, my voice low but unyielding. I reminded her that her rights ended when she chose to walk out that door, when she spent 8 months weaving a web of lies. She had no claim on my life anymore. Her hands shook, her bravado crumbling as the reality of my words sank in. Then, In a frantic bid to regain control, she pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed her lover's number right there in front of me. She held the phone to her ear, her eyes darting to mine, as if daring me to react. The seconds stretched, and when the call went to voicemail, her face fell, a raw panic replacing her defiance. I leaned back, folding my arms, and remarked that her new joy didn't seem too eager to answer. The words struck hard, and she sank into a chair, tears spilling over, her mask shattered. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman who'd hurt me, but as someone trapped by her own choices, alone in the wreckage she'd made. Standing there, watching her unravel, I felt no triumph, only release. The night before, sitting in the dark, I'd shed the last of my doubts. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one choosing how this story ended. Clara's tears didn't move me, not because I was cruel, but because I'd given her all I had, and she'd thrown it away. I picked up the small bag I packed, my movements calm, and walked to the door. I told her I'd be gone until she was out, that this was her mess to clean up. As I stepped outside, the morning air was crisp, carrying the promise of something new. I didn't look back, knowing I'd already left her behind. Days later, I found myself at a familiar dive bar, its neon sign flickering outside as I settled onto a stool beside Derek. The place was small, the jukebox humming an old tune, but it felt like a haven after the storm I'd weathered. Derek slid a beer my way, his grin wide as I recounted the final showdown with Clara. I told him how I'd laid out the sale of the house, how her defiance had collapsed when her call to her lover went unanswered, how I'd walked out without a backward glance. The realtor was moving fast, the paperwork already in motion, and I was free. Derek laughed, raising his bottle, saying here's to a new Marcus, to a fresh start. We clinked glasses, and I felt a genuine smile break through, the first in what seemed like forever. As we talked, I let my mind wander to what came next. I pictured driving along the coast, the ocean stretching endless beside me, or maybe landing in a new city, one where no one knew my name. The possibilities felt vast, not daunting but inviting, each one a chance to rediscover who I was without Clara's shadow. I didn't need to have it all figured out yet. The freedom to choose was enough, a gift I hadn't realized I'd been missing. My phone buzzed, pulling me back. A message from Clara appeared, her words stripped of their usual venom. She apologized, said she'd made a terrible mistake, asked for a chance to make things right. I read it slowly, my thumb hovering over the screen. A part of me, small and buried, felt a pang, a ghost of the love I'd once had. But it wasn't enough to sway me. Her words were too late, too hollow after all she'd done. I deleted the message, the act simple but final, like closing a book I'd never open again. She belonged to my past, not my future. Derek leaned back, watching me with a knowing look. He shared something else, his voice careful but steady. He'd heard through mutual friends that Clara had been reaching out, trying to track me down, asking where I was, what I planned. No one had answered her, he said. They'd seen her for what she was, and they'd chosen to stand by me instead. The news didn't spark joy, but it settled something in me. My honesty, my loyalty, had built bonds she couldn't touch, while her lies had left her isolated, her world shrinking as mine began to expand. Sitting there, the bar's chatter fading into the background, I traced the path that had brought me here. I'd once thought losing Clara would destroy me, that her absence would leave a hole too deep to climb out of. But losing her had done the opposite. It had forced me to see myself clearly, to find a strength I'd forgotten I had. Her betrayal was a bitter lesson, but it taught me that love isn't about clinging to someone who doesn't value you. It's about respecting yourself enough to walk away. I'd learned to forgive, not for her sake, but for mine, to let go of the anger so I could carry hope instead. Clara's choices had cost her everything. The home we'd shared, the life she'd taken for granted, and maybe even the man she'd chased who hadn't answered her call. I didn't revel in her loss, but I didn't pity her either. She'd built her own cage. For me, standing up after her betrayal meant more than surviving. It meant thriving. I finished my beer, the taste sharp and satisfying, and felt the road ahead calling, open and alive with promise. This journey's reached its end for now. I'd love to hear if this ending hit the mark for you, or if it caught you by surprise. Share your thoughts below. If you've enjoyed this story, hit like and subscribe for more. Thanks for joining me. and I'll see you in the next one.